The year 2000. Two pension funds belonging to a British high street chain are in surplus. £43 million to the good. 15 years later, the same two funds are £571 million short. Measured on the basis that decides everything, what an insurer would charge to guarantee every promised pension. In between, the company changes hands for £1. 163 shops, 11,000 staff. None of it, the dividends, the sale, the shortfall, has ever been charged as a crime. How does a fund travel from surplus to that? Sir Philip Green has never been charged with or convicted of any criminal offence in connection with BHS. He settled with the pensions regulator without any admission of liability. Because it settled, the allegations were never tested. The criticisms in this film are the words of MPs, not of a court. He called the report the predetermined and inaccurate output of a biased and unfair process. Tavita Investments called the sale an honest mistake made in good faith. 19,000 people had a pension in those funds. Around 9,000 ended up in a new scheme paying, on the regulator's own figures, about 88 pence in the pound. That is the part almost nobody tells. The year 2000. Philip Green buys British home stores for £200 million. The knighthood comes 6 years later for services to the retail industry. It comes with shops and 2 pension schemes. In their joint report of the 25th of July 2016, the two Commons committees put those schemes in a single line. A combined surplus of £43 million. Surplus, not deficit. More money in the funds than the promises required. Not a wreck bought cheap and run into the ground. A business that owned its buildings, and a pension fund that was ahead. Most of this was on the record. Few read it. 2002 to 2004. In their joint report, the two committees wrote that BHS Limited paid £414 million in dividends across those 3 years, against post-tax profit of £208 million. The Green family, they wrote, received £307 million. Bought in surplus, run at a profit, paid out at twice the profit. The committee's announcement sets out a second route. 10 shops sold in 2001 for £106 million to a company in Jersey whose ultimate beneficiary, the committee said, was Lady Green. £153 million paid back to it in rent in the years after. The shops came back to BHS only in 2015 for 70. Quietly, methodically. And nothing here was unlawful. Every other creditor can send a letter and stop the lorries at the gate. A pension fund cannot. It is the one creditor that can always be asked to wait. Call it what it was, the patient creditor. Deficits come in 3 sizes: what it costs to keep the scheme running, what the lifeboat would need, what an insurer would charge to guarantee every pension in full. The regulator's own table sets all 3 side by side. The number everybody quotes, 571 million, is the third. The trustees asked for more. The committees wrote that Green and his directors repeatedly resisted those requests. Project Thor would have restructured the fund while BHS was solvent. In January 2015, it was paused. 2 months later, the company was sold for £1. The 11th of March 2015. British Home Stores is sold for £1 to Retail Acquisitions Limited. Its sole director, the High Court later recorded, was Dominic Chappell. Goldman Sachs had looked at the buyer for the seller, unpaid, without a formal mandate. It flagged risks, the bank's own words quoted in the report. No retail experience, a bankruptcy, proposals that were highly preliminary. It never said no. The committees record the bank's evidence that it was not asked to judge or to recommend. The committee's phrase for that arrangement was, "authority without accountability." 2 years on, the seller would pay up to £363 million, expressly on the basis of no admission of liability. Hold that. The next day, the 12th of March, the pensions regulator opened an anti-avoidance investigation. Nothing stopped. 13 months. The committees set out in their joint report what the new owner took. £2.6 million in salary and fees. An interest-free loan of £1.5 million to his family, never repaid. In total, they wrote, £4.1 million. Chappell called the salary and fees a drip in the ocean. The 3rd of March 2016, a company voluntary arrangement. Both schemes enter assessment for the Pension Protection Fund. The 25th of April, administration. None of it was hidden. None of it was stopped. What a court would call it, and who would pay for it, took another 9 years. The 28th of August 2016. The last 22 of 163 shops close. 88 years of British High Street, ending with a closing down sign and a shutter. 11,000 jobs. And 19,000 people with a pension in the 2 BHS schemes. 12,000 still working towards retirement. 7,000 already drawing. They were the patient creditor. Nobody ever had to tell them to wait. What those 19,000 would eventually get took another 2 years to decide. And it is the part almost nobody tells. The 15th of June, 2016. A committee room in Westminster, a glass of water, a row of microphones. Sir Philip Green gives evidence for 6 hours. Frank Field, who had chaired the Work and Pensions Committee since 2015, is one of the 2 men putting the questions. He died in 2024. Afterwards, the chairs published a joint comment. Field and Ian Wright wrote that he had come before the bar of public opinion and that there were big questions on the pension fund that he was unable to answer today. They added that they were pleased to hear he was still trying to put together a better deal for the BHS pensioners. 6 hours. One man answering. Nothing settled. The 25th of July, 2016. In their joint report, the 2 committees wrote that this is the unacceptable face of capitalism, and, their words, that there is a massive deficit is ultimately Sir Philip Green's responsibility. In the announcement that day, Frank Field said, "One person, and one person alone, is really responsible for the BHS disaster." Ian Wright, who chaired the Business Committee, said the sale to a consortium led by a twice-bankrupt Chancellor with no retail experience should never have gone ahead. A select committee is not a court. It takes evidence and publishes findings. It has no power to convict anyone of anything. 3 months later, the House of Commons held a vote it had never held before about a knighthood. The 20th of October, 2016. MPs backed a non-binding motion calling for Sir Philip Green's knighthood to be removed. The record is not clear on how many voted, and the Commons does not always divide. David Winnick, the Labour member for Walsall North, called him a billionaire spiv. The motion went to the Honours Forfeiture Committee, which decides these things in private. It has never announced a decision. Its position is that it does not review an honour while formal investigations run. He is still Sir Philip Green. If you have a workplace pension of the old kind, you are in one of these. You will find out how it went at the end. The 28th of February 2017, he pays £343 million into an independent escrow account to fund a new scheme. Up to 20 million more for costs, up to 363 million in all. If it could not be built in 15 months, The money went to the old funds. The regulator's own report records the terms. Expressly on the basis of no admission of liability. The regulator wrote that twice. Green and the Tavita companies never responded to the allegations in the warning notice. It settled before the panel that would have decided it. Nobody has ever tested them. On the day he paid, Sir Philip Green said that any pensioner who had suffered cuts would be brought back to their original BHS starting level and made whole. Members were given 3 choices: a new, independent scheme, a lump sum for the smallest pots, or the lifeboat. 9,105 transferred. Nearly 9,000 took a lump sum. The rest stayed where they were. The regulator's own figures put it differently. On average, the new scheme delivers around 88% of the full BHS benefit, more than 80% for over 99% of members. Not the full pension, far more than the lifeboat would have paid. On the 13th of August 2018, the new scheme bought out its liabilities with the Pension Insurance Corporation. £800 million. Dominic Chappell. In January 2018, he was convicted of failing to comply with the regulator's notices under Section 77 of the Pensions Act. The regulator's panel had already ordered contribution notices against him. £9.5 million. The 5th of November 2020, Southwark Crown Court. A jury had convicted him of cheating the public revenue. Mr. Justice Bryan put the loss at £583,000 and sentenced him to 6 years, calling him essentially penniless, owing millions to the pension regulator. He was released on license in November 2023 and recalled to prison in March 2024. What has happened since is not on any record this film could check. The High Court later held him liable in the civil courts. A first instance ruling, untested on appeal. There are more of these. Subscribe, and the next one finds you. £583,000. 571 million. Side by side, they look like an argument. They are not. One is a tax debt owed by one man. The other is the cost of guaranteeing 19,000 pensions. I've watched people compare them anyway. A company was sold, lawfully, for £1. The committees wrote that the seller knew the buyer was, their words, a wholly unsuitable purchaser. The regulator's case settled, with no admission of liability, no charge, no conviction, no admission. The answer is not that somebody got away with something. It is that there was, at almost every step, nothing to get away with. £343 million, expressly on the basis of no admission of liability. Around 88 pence in the pound, on the regulator's figures, for those who moved. The patient creditor paid at last and paid short. Remember the number this film opened with? £43 million, in surplus. The man who put the questions did not live to hear the last answer. One man was sentenced for cheating the public revenue and for ignoring the regulator's notices. The other was never charged at all. None of it, the dividends, the rent, the sale for £1, has ever been charged as a crime. That is not the defense in this story. That is the story. The money always leaves a trace. Read the footnote. 11,000 jobs, £1, and no admission of liability. 6 years later, an English council of 175,000 people borrowed £1 billion of other councils' money and lost nearly half of it. That story is already here. Thurrock,